Now, the long-awaited redacted Mueller report, there it is, more than 400 pages long.
The findings of the special counsel investigation into Russian interference and the 2016 presidential election came out this morning. They are based on more than 2,800 subpoenas, nearly 500 search warrants, and approximately 500 witness interviews. The Attorney General says it has found no evidence of collusion.
And no evidence of obstruction by the President of the United States.
The special counsel confirmed that the Russian government sponsored efforts to illegally interfere with the 2016 presidential election, but did not find that the Trump campaign or other Americans colluded in those efforts.
Tonight, Democrats are demanding to see the full unredacted version.
We wanted to hear what a former federal prosecutor thinks about all of this. Our Adam Bennett spoke with Philip Hilder, who is now a defense attorney in Houston. And Adam, he's got a lot of questions.
He sure does, Sherman. You know, Hilder thinks that Mueller did the best job he could given the limited amount of time for this type of an investigation. He thinks things probably got sped along because of the constant threat of Mueller being fired. And he thinks there could have been a more complete investigation with more time and more support from the White House. Now, Hilder told me that he was most surprised by the seemingly great lengths that President Trump went to interfere with the investigation. He points out the ordering the White House counsel to fire Mueller. Hilder says he believes that if the findings had involved anyone else, he thinks they would have been indicted for obstruction of justice. But the Justice Department policy does not allow a sitting president to be prosecuted. Hilder also thinks that President Trump's decision to answer investigators' written questions instead of doing an in-person interview may have also helped the White House.
Nobody has a reason to celebrate. I mean, this report, when you read it, it's chilling. It is a very poor reflection on what happened about our election being infiltrated and attempted manipulations by the Russians, and also it shows a administration that will do and go to great lengths to save itself, which is more reflective of the mafia don as opposed to a presidential don.
Now, the former prosecutor believes Mueller put out the facts to let Congress follow up. Hilder thinks that the report's redactions also suggest there could be more investigations or even more charges to come. But whatever happens, he says he expects to hear a lot about this report from now through November 2020 and possibly even beyond. Reporting live in the newsroom, Adam Bennett, KHOU 11 News.
Thank you, Adam. And we want to know your feelings. Have they changed on the Mueller report as of today? Your options are yes or no. You can vote on the KHOU 11 mobile app or on KHOU.com/vote now.